themselves. Educators, I believe, are one of our most precious assets. Back in the day, as they say, educators used to be really revered in the community, whereas now not so much for whatever reason. But I still commend them because every single day when they interact with the children, they get a chance to potentially touch that child for life. And each of us get a chance to really, if we go back in our own minds, there'll be one day, one person, one instance that really made us change. We would think back on it now and we celebrate it. And that would have caused us to change our trajectory, as it were. Sometimes we might have been disobedient, and one small thing makes a change. You might not have been doing very well in a certain subject. You get light bulb goes on one day, and therefore, you go from there to there. So I'm going to listen again to everyone who tunes in tonight. Thank you very much for tuning in. We are excited to have you join us here on Magic 102.7 on your Sunday evening for another edition of Insight. Tonight, we're going to have a special, not special, but a different type of subject, because you know that we always focus on finances. This time, we'll also do finance, but guess what? People say, right, that free and fair elections are the cornerstones of democracy. And many will say, I think most will say, if not everyone will say, in Bermuda, we do have free and fair elections. However, they're not perfect. And so tonight we're going to talk with the Honorable Minister Dello Rabin, who is primarily responsible for the Bermuda government's electoral reform, I'm going to call it. And we're going to allow him to give his spiel, introduce himself, ask lots of questions, I believe, because there are many things about elections and electoral reform that can be asked, and hopefully we can be answered. You, as the listening audience, will be invited to join in after maybe a half hour or so. You can call us on 297-1027. You can email us now if you choose at insightbda@gmail.com. And the most efficient way, to be honest, is to send a message via WhatsApp on 538-8683 or directly on Facebook. I will see them. I can give a comment. And what I do as the show goes on is I give my comments, of course, but I do incorporate any comments that are coming in via WhatsApp or otherwise, and then callers will obviously ask the question directly. As always, we will be respectful, give you opinion, try to base it on some sort of fact, but also once you ask a question, allow the minister to answer the question as opposed to trying to tell him what the answer is. And so having said all that, to the Honorable Minister, Honorable Dello Rabin, who are you? We always ask that, right, in this question, because even though we think we know you from this scenario, that scenario, some people went to school with you, for example, how do you want to introduce yourself to the listening audience this evening?
Thank you, Anthony, and thank you to your listening audience. Who is Mr. Rabin? Well, first and foremost, I'm a father of a soon-to-be 16-year-old, which in itself brings its own particular challenges while being here in Bermuda. And I like to think everything that I do is looking out for her future as well as her peers' future. I often watch them or observe them having their conversations. And one thing that I have learned is our children are a lot more in tune with what's happening in the world and specifically Bermuda, than we were at that age. And it's just a byproduct of how fast things move in today's world. There used to be a saying, I remember when I came back from school, where you would hear from, especially our elders, and I don't know, Anthony, if you've ever heard this, but you know when you're old enough to know, right? And
Sure.
That was probably more along the lines of, because in those days, it took a certain level of time before you became skillful enough to actually do some of the things that you wanted to do. Now there seems to be so much exposure early on with the advent of, with the internet, with YouTube, with now with artificial intelligence. Yeah. I mean, literally things are at your fingertips, and there's no need to go and do the research and go ask persons when a lot of this stuff is right there at their fingertips. And so I do advise parents to just pay attention to your children, and the one thing that they want is you to be there. And so when I describe myself, I like to describe myself as a parent that's there when my daughter wants to talk, and also there when they don't want to talk. Anthony, you started the show off with an interesting statement about parents and the things and what children learn at home. And in my former life, and as a minister of another portfolio,
education, no problem.
I used to say all the time that schools are for children to learn, but children learn to love learning at home. And that's where that starts. Far too many times our schools are looked at as somewhere where my children can go, so I don't have to be bothered with them, so I can do what I want to do. But it doesn't stop there. There's no school, regardless public or private, that can provide your children 100% of the things that they need. And so, Anthony, when you ask, who am I? I'm a passionate person who's passionate about public life, who's passionate about giving back to the community. I've done this virtually all of my life since growing up from primary school, whether it was volunteering or helping out in fundraisers and different things like that. That continued when I was in high school, that continued when I was in college, and it continued when I came back. My work with various charities is well documented. I think one of the proudest awards that I've ever gotten was an award I got for Volunteer of the Year.
Okay.
For an organization that I was working with, that then expanded on to work with my fraternity and providing avenues and upliftment of, in particular, young males in Bermuda. Then that translated into my political life, where I started off at the branch level, like as most of us do. I can't say we all do now, but most of us do. I've been through every office at the branch level. I've been office at the party level, committee levels at the party level. I know one thing that people don't know about me. I've once been the chairman of the delegates conference.
That's fun.
When you get voted in as the delegate, as the chairman, I've been the chairman of the delegates conference. Then moved on to what I would call frontline politics, being in the Senate. I believe I'm one of the few people left that have been a government senator, an opposition senator, an opposition MP, and a government MP. I do believe I'm the only one left that's actually still in frontline politics, but I don't believe there are many older persons left that have gone through that change. So I like to call myself as approachable. Anyone can call on me, ask me any question. I might not have the answer for you, or I might not have the answer you want to hear, but I will try my best to get you the information that you seek. And so I just like to think of myself as an approachable person, a person who's really, really committed to public life at this point in my life, in my particular life, committed to public life and committed to just doing what needs to be done to help the people of Bermuda the best way I can. And that, for me, crosses some of the things that we do have to, the partisan rancor needs to kind of slow down, especially when we're talking about something as important as electoral reform. You would have heard me say when I speak about electoral reform that this is not a PLP initiative, this is not an OBA initiative, it's not an independent initiative. This is an initiative by the people of Bermuda. And voting is something that has had its ups and downs over the years. And when we look at this is the next stage in the evolution of election, electoral elections that we have in Bermuda. We've come a long way, and I like to think that that doesn't mean there isn't more that can be done to make our elections better than what they are, but better than what they are now, although they are quite excellent as they are at current.
Excellent. And talk a bit about your background, because I know you have a professional background also.
Yes. My background, I have a degree in electrical engineering. I did start working at Public Works. Back then it was called Works in Engineering. I worked there for about 4 years before I left out and started my own company with two other partners. And that was back in 1998. I'm proud to say that company is still in existence today. Interestingly, Anthony, when I talked about always willing to give back, one of the staunch mandates that when we started the company was that we would train Bermudians as much as possible, and we have and we still do have a training program that's currently in place, and we take on Bermudians, and not to part of the thing was not to take them on to say this is where you'll be for the rest of your life, but here's a start. Here's somebody who cares. Here's some people who care about our young Bermudians, who care about how they interact in society, and provide them with an avenue to go on and do other things. I can go down the line, and I do know of quite a few of the young men and women that have come through our company that have gone on to be successful in their own right once they've left and gone on and done the things that that was truly interesting to them.
Okay, and that's a lot, and it's interesting again because each person would say they knew you from a different area, whether it be school or the profession or whatever. And I like when persons do themselves, because that way we know what their thoughts are and how they want to be not known, but how just wanted to bring things to the fore. And again, it's always interesting. So again, to listening audience, thank you for joining us here on Magic 102.7 on your Sunday evening for another edition of Insight. You've just heard Minister Rabin give his introduction in terms of, in my words, who he is. And interesting that you fell back to your but your previous portfolio as a minister to talk about education. And timing-wise also, I didn't realize your daughter's going to be almost 16 or going to be 16 soon, right? And as you said, it's I would say it's more than interesting as she progresses to become a young woman and those kind of things. And you as daddy have to start to pass the reins. You know what I mean? You got to be there but not be there, and know when to be there, when not to be there, and know when to quote unquote be in the way and when not to be in the way, and to allow her to develop. And so again, congratulations as you get to experience that next phase. And then obviously your politics has been, I think that's pretty well documented in terms of what you've been doing. And before we go into tonight's discussion, talk a little bit, please, more about your fraternity, because I think it's important from a service point of view, but to make sure people understand that it's not just a big bravado and all this crazy things, but there is a purpose behind it and how you guys have been successful over a period of time in the community.
Well, first I'll start with our motto, manly deeds, scholarship, and love of all mankind. And that is about performing manly deeds. It's about scholarship. Education is critically important to us. And then the love of all mankind is just, we're looking out for everyone that we can. And so I'm a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, who was founded in 1906, December 4th, 1906, at Cornell University, the only black fraternity or sorority that was founded at a Ivy League school. So the purpose of the founders was to basically help each other. You can imagine what it was like in 1906 being at an Ivy League school, and the abuse and the discouragement that in particular black students would face. And what they noticed was every year when they came back to school, there were less and less.
Wow.
And so they decided to form a group that said, hey, we're here to support you, we're here to help you, which then launched into the idea of an actual fraternity. What a lot of people don't know about Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated is that we've had a presence in Bermuda for 75 years. And 75 years, the members of this fraternity have been part of some of the movers and shakers of the Bermuda we see today. And so members of our fraternity have been part of the theater boycott, have been part of the Franchise Act, have been part of the formation, have been some of the first leaders of the Progressive Labor Party, some of the first leaders of the United Bermuda Party. Bermuda's first premier, E.T. Richards, was a member of Alpha Phi Alpha. He was the first premier of Bermuda, and obviously he was the black premier of Bermuda. And so through the years, we've continued to perform community service as best we can. Some years it's much more, some years it's not as much. Right now, our key program that currently exists is our Alpha Bootilion program. That is our high school mentoring program, where we ask every high school to submit to us a senior. And the idea is to introduce the concept of you're competing with each other, but at the same time, you're uplifting each other. And so we try to mold these young men into understanding that, yes, you are competing with the man next to you, but at the same time, you are supporting that man and you are uplifting that man, and you guys are working together. You are finding what each other's weaknesses are, so you can collectively build up and shore up those particular weaknesses, because we recognize that you can go far But you can go somewhere by yourself, but you'll go much further if you go with other people. And you got to have those collective thoughts. So we've, over the years, we've administered this program just over 20 years, and we've given out, I want to say in the region of around $300,000 in bursary funds. So everyone, just being in the program, you get money, but there is a first, second, and third that'll get much more. I think right now we're up to $7,500 for first place, $5,000 for second place, $4,000 for third, and then everybody else gets $1,500, and that goes towards their eventual schooling. Okay. So we take them. They do work with Toastmasters to learn how to speak, learn how to project themselves. They do volunteer work. We do partner with Matilda Smith, but we also do other things, other volunteer work with other charities as well. Here more recently, with some of the, I want to say, younger brothers have introduced a physical activity part of this, and these guys are out running, so they now want a part of the program is they do the Bermuda Day marathon. Okay. They do the relay. Yeah. And depending on how many we have, typically we have two teams. We try to have two teams, and if we are short any of the alpha birds, as we call them, some of the brothers chip in to actually run with them. Okay. And so we try to do fun things like that. So we have bowling nights. We also do movie nights and different things with them as well. And another part of the program is we all send them to New York for our Leadership Development Institute, the Fraternities Leadership Development Institute as well. So they will then be in the presence of other high schoolers from around the East Coast, up and down the East Coast. And sometimes they get a chance to understand that while they might be a big fish in a little pond in Bermuda, they're just a regular sized fish when they leave. And it gives them an opportunity to meet high schoolers, male high schoolers from other places, and typically, and I do want to put our hats off to our Bermudian men, young men, because they typically hold their own, and they're always kudos and lots of congratulations. When I travel to fraternal meetings and stuff, and I'll talk to the guys who run LDI, and I say, yeah, those guys you sent, they were on the money. They knew this, they could speak, and so it gives kudos to the program we're doing here in Bermuda and the upbringing that we do have in our youth here. So you hear a lot of negative stuff about especially our young black males. Not saying that we only have young black males that participate, but they're the majority. Sure. But when these guys can hold their own when they travel and they're up against the best of the best from other places as well. Yes. Okay. But they generally hold their own, and we generally get pats on the back to say we like what you guys do. Whatever you guys are doing, keep doing it, because these guys are on the money.
Excellent. All right, Minister, thank you for that tremendous background information, and for the listening audience, trusting that you will think through these different things, and when we hear about the fraternity in particular, to know it's a positive and constructive opportunity. By the way, real quick, how is it funded? How do you guys fund those things, these scholarships and the rest of it? Is it just donations by the members?
We fund them by chapter dues. Brothers have to pay their annual dues, and we fundraise. Okay. And the Alpha Battalion accumulates with a show at Ruth Eden James, and of course there's a fee to come and see the show. And typically, and that's part of the growth process, because they are judged on their ticket sales and their advert sales as well. That's part of it's not the be all end all of the judging, but that is a part of it as well, because we want them to know how to work for themselves and kind of push them out there. And some of them do have to come out of that shy zone and know, hey, I gotta go and talk. I gotta go and sell myself. And so so that's part of the maturing process of this program as well. I will say that we've had quite a few young men who have gone through our program that have gone off to school and joined the fraternity. Have joined. And if you give me this leeway of a couple of seconds.
A few more seconds. Go ahead.
I love telling this story that I was in Kansas City, Kansas.
Yes.
For if people know Kansas City, half of it's in Missouri, half of it's in Kansas. It's right on the border. So I was in Kansas City, and we were doing something, and I overheard these young brothers from university saying that they attend William and Mary. right? And I walked over to them and said, hey, I have an Alpha Beau who is attending William and Mary, right? And they said, well, give me the name, blah, blah, blah. And we exchanged pleasantries and stuff. And so this would have been in June of that year. In September, the young man messaged me to say, did you say anything to anybody? And I said, what? I said, well, I met some guys and mentioned, say, yeah, well, this guy is my RA. And he said, you're from Bermuda. Diallo mentioned you. We're going to make sure you're straight.
You never knew.
Right?
Yeah, you never knew.
And he actually went on to join the fraternity afterwards as well. This young man, based on that interaction of him going there and saying, hey, someone mentioned my name, and because your name was mentioned and because of our network, we'll make sure that you are sorted. And he was looked after while he was in school.
Again, you never knew. You never knew. All right, so Mr. Minister, now let's talk about this election reform, electoral reform, in terms of what's it all about, why is it being done now, and why is the PLP government doing it? You said it's not a PLP or an OBA thing, so let's talk about those things and inform the public as to what you are talking about or what you're leading about in terms of this overall electoral reform.
Well, I'd have to go back to 2017, and the Progressive Labor Party, during that election, the Progressive Labor Party made it part of the election manifesto that we would be looking into electoral reform. And at that point, it was specifically talking about election financing. And one of the reasons we spoke about it back then is that we always stated that we wanted elections won or lost based on not how much money the particular party or candidate had, but on ideas. And so financial reform in elections looks to level that playing field because, and as Bermuda has progressed and advanced as a society, we've adopted more election strategies that have been used elsewhere. And so when I say that, I talk about the use of social media, the use of influential purchasing of adverts and different things like that. Bermuda's Election Act was written for a time, and it works very, very well, but it was written for a time when elections weren't as modern as they are now. So that's just one of the pillars when we talk about campaign and political financing. The other pillar, so there are 4 pillars that we're looking at.
Yes.
And voter access and registration. That is to improve the registration process, improve the way the voter roll is updated on a regular basis, and to, when we say voter access, widen the access, and most people refer to this as absentee balloting. And so I do get the questions when we have these town halls that we have about the absentee balloting, because we specifically say for students who would normally be in Bermuda if they weren't in school. But I do recognize that people have mentioned other categories of persons. And how I do answer that, Anthony, is that our elections in the way they run now have been hard fought, and there's been some not so nice things done and utilized by the electoral process. When we talk about the +1 vote, and we talk about
in the past,
right in the past,
yes,
and also elections have been used as a way of creating lines in the sand. You can go back to the 70s when immigration, and a lot of people talk about immigration and why we don't get on with it, but don't understand the sensitiveness of the fact that was used to bias elections, and the way. So that's where some of the trepidation comes from. Hey, what do we want to do about some of the things that people say that we should be thinking about, we should be doing right away? One of the things that I do say when I give this presentation is I am fully understanding that there are some things in Bermuda that we can do instantly, and there are other things that require baby steps and bringing people along as we make movements through. So one of the things here about widening the franchise is that's one of the things that needs to be done in baby steps and needs to be done with a lot of input from the public. Because when you start talking about allowing persons to vote who don't live in Bermuda and all of those types of things, the first thing that goes up is some people think back to the time when this was used as a weapon versus actually used to move forward. The other pillar is election day and the voting process. This is where we talk about one thing that we have we noted from this previous election is it was unlike anything that we've had before. There were like 110 candidates. There were plenty of independents. There were quasi parties outside of the two main ones, and all sorts of things. And our processes are more, I want to use the term folksy, like Bermudian-esque, but they were not done in a way that contemplated the challenges that were going to be faced in this one of having multiple candidates and different things. So part of this is looking at how do we come up with a standardized playbook of how elections are run on the day that not just talk about, so we have written documentation of what happens inside the polling booth.
Right.
What happens outside the polling booth is kind of, this is what we've always done. Sort of conversations take place. And so there were some comments made in this past election that didn't sit well with some people. And then there were some things where it wasn't allowed at one voting area, one voting polling booth, but it might have been allowed at another one. So, so we're saying, hey, this stuff just needs to be articulated, put down, and done in a way that still retains the Bermuda feel. To our election. Bermuda elections are unique, as they are in probably all of our island homes. They're unique, and we have to capture that Bermudian cultural feel, but also put some guardrails in place.
Okay.
And the last one is electoral governance and oversight, and that is actually strengthening the Parliamentary Registrar's office and putting the necessary tools in place so we can have oversight of these things that we're talking about, like finance, the voting process on the day, and et cetera. So those are the four pillars of what we call electoral reform as we move forward.
Okay, just to clarify and to repeat, so the four pillars of the electoral reform, if I got my notes correct, would be voter access and registration,
yes,
funding, election day, and
campaign and political finance.
Okay, so
that's the term we use.
Okay, so campaign and political finance.
Yes.
Political finance.
Election day
voting processes. And the fourth one is going to be electoral governance and oversight.
Yes.
Which is really the...
those are the four pillars.
Okay. So, yeah. So, four pillars. Now, can I go now? Okay, good. So one thing I want to talk about that I think is for everybody is the idea of absentee voting, right? You said already that it's not everybody is going to be absentee voting for those students that are otherwise resident in Bermuda. Talk to us about how that worked, because to be honest, I'm surprised it hasn't happened already. In terms of you're overseas, there's got to be a way to register. We know you are because you're a student, and let them register. So talk to us about why not, what some of the issues are to make it happen and for it to be accurate.
Well, I think one of the things that really surprised me is some conversations with students. Because I thought this was something like everyone would just be for. I've had students say, why should I vote? I'm not there.
Well,
like I've literally had students say that. And it was interesting having them online, because obviously they're not here. We did these online conversations and listening to them kind of talk to each other. I was like, what do you mean you don't want to vote?
Right.
It's like, well, I don't, I'm in school. I don't really care what goes on back home, until I get there. And it was very, very interesting. And I was actually kind of, taken aback and proud because we had some dialogue going on between the students.
Yes.
And we were just sitting back and listening to them come to their various conclusions. Why we haven't introduced absentee balloting, that I can't answer that question.
Okay.
I can't answer that question. I want to say the technology, because I'm looking at it from the technology we have now.
Yes.
Perhaps what we had prior was what brought about the trepidation, but the technology we have now makes it very secure, makes it easier to manage. When we talk about now going to the nerdy stuff of blockchain security and
you could be, by the way, I want you to at some point talk about you as the electronics guy, because you have whether it be professional or just a good interest in terms of what I call the various e-systems.
So we've actually held meetings with persons who conduct electronic absentee balloting worldwide, and so we've we've seen some things that we were like, yeah, this looks like it could really work. We've seen some things like, probably shy away from that.
Okay.
I can let the public know, and there are very few things where you'll see me say there's a red line and we'll never cross that, because the purpose of consultation is to listen to everybody's idea.
Yes.
Not everybody's idea is going to make it, but you want to hear everyone's idea. But the one thing that we know that we're not going to do is mail-in ballots.
And why?
Postal ballots.
Why not?
Simply because if you're talking about time constraints. First of all, the reliability of the ballot making it to Bermuda on a timely basis, and the way our elections are currently done, there's a very short window that ballot would have to get here, and the security part of the ballot as well. When you're talking about mail-in ballots, it's who knows, and that's who knows where it could end up.
Yes.
Eventually, and then you're talking about I voted, but it's not counted. And that's where you start getting into the integrity of the vote and the secrecy of your vote.
Yes,
because you're like, I mailed it in, but I've been marked as not voted, and and that raises some issues. So for me, that would raise just issues that we can avoid if we just stuck to electronic balloting along those lines. I pointed out to someone the other day, Anthony, that it is possible to open a bank account in Bermuda without going into a bank.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Without going into a bank, and it's done highly secure, and it's and the ID checks and all that stuff is top notch, and all of it's done to ensure that you are the person you say you are.
Yes.
And your funding is legitimate, and all of that stuff is done without even going into the bank. Now that technology exists of verifying someone as who they are, whether it's digital facial recognition, retinal recognition, and all sorts of things are there. The part that we need from that. So one of those things is what type of electronic voting, because when legally right now, students aren't allowed to vote. So we say just let them vote, but actually legally they're not, because our laws say that in order to vote in an election, you must be present on Bermuda for a minimum of 6 months out of the year. If students are gone,
Yes, okay.
if they're in school for 8 of the 12 months, they're not here for 6 months, right? So there's things that need to be worked out. Like, how do you actually work that?
Okay.
One thing that came, and this came from the students, was, so if you're just saying Bermudians who are in school can vote, I've never been to, this one chap is like, I ain't been back to Bermuda in 20 plus years.
Correct.
So if I'm a Bermudian that hasn't been to Bermuda in 20 plus years and I enroll in school, that means I automatically get to vote. So those are some of the nuances that actually need to be looked at to ensure. And like, how do you prove that someone is a legitimate student that is normally resides in Bermuda and not somewhere else? The other portion of that also would need to be worked out is, how do you register if you hadn't registered before you left for school, but you are normally registered here in Bermuda?
You come back, okay, gotcha.
Right. Yeah. So those are some of the things that we need to, and that's some of the policy direction that needs to be done prior to us looking at what legislative changes need to be put in place. And so that's always been our stance: is do the policy work, do the data gathering from the public to see what, how far we as Bermudians want to go. Then we can put together the legislative framework for this to move forward.
And with that, I know you've been having lots of town halls and other meetings, right? What's been the actual level of interest or the interaction, even the attendance, if you will, and the number of comments or suggestions that you have received?
To be perfectly honest, it's based on the uproar that we did have. It's been very disappointing to date. It's been fruitful because you respect the people who do spend the time to come out and talk, and they have their thoughts, processes together, and they're asking legitimate questions. They want to know, if this happens, what would happen there. And so I enjoyed that part of it.
Yes.
But the level of attendance and the level of response has been a bit disappointing.
Okay.
And I'm hoping that we'll see, just more people get interested in it. I have a feeling because, I've done this before in another area.
Right. Yes.
Once you come on and say, this is how we're moving forward, that's when you'll find people will want to voice their opinion. And so that's why I said we'll take this comments, put together something based on a working group made out of a cross-section of Bermudians, and then go forward and say, well, based on what we've collected, based on what we've heard, this is how we say, this is where we think we should be going forth. And there'll be a second bite at the cherry for persons to then have comments on that.
Gotcha. Because if I'm not mistaken, the OBA did introduce a bill some months ago that was voted down, or what happened? I can't remember.
No, the bill was not voted down. In a nutshell, the One Bermuda Alliance introduced an opposition bill that asked that absentee balloting be legislated. But it also said, and their stance was that, but go figure out how it's going to work after the fact.
In principle, okay.
And so I said, I did spend some time reaching out across the aisle, and I had extensive conversations with MP Robinson on it.
Yes.
Only written correspondence between Mr. King and myself about this. And our stance always was that we must work out how this is going to work, or at least have a direction on what people are going to tolerate before we put something in place. Because once you put legislation in place and it's in error, right? And it's in error, then you might find yourself having to allow something that is not palatable to the general public. So the response that I consistently got from Mr. King on that was, well, introduce amendments if you don't feel that it covers anything. And I was like, we can't introduce amendments about policies policy work we haven't done yet. Right, and that was always my stance. But at the end of the day, and this is where I always leave this, is that the speaker ruled that the bill was out of order and it was not allowed to move forward. And so there is no second guessing of the speaker's decision.
Yes.
So for those who who aren't familiar with parliamentary procedures, any bill that will require expenditure from the consolidated fund can only be introduced or supported by the government.
Right.
So this bill was ruled that it would if it was to come into effect, it would require monies to be spent in order for it to be enacted. And so that's where the speaker then ruled it was out of order. I know there were some complaints that, why waited this long, and that was why wait this long before making that point or pointing that out is because I spent a lot of time reaching out and saying, guys, we can't move forward in this way. Let's step back and let's work on this together. I want to say even one of my letters to the opposition leader stated that I am willing to stand with Mr. Robinson at a podium and say, we are working on this together. Then let's just move forward together.
At a press conference.
Yeah, at a press conference.
Sure.
And that, unfortunately, that was not accepted. And they continued to move forward with it until the speaker then made his final ruling.
That's interesting because, just as a small aside there, that sometimes we think of it as if the government and opposition, whoever's in government at the time, does not work with the opposition. But sometimes you're right, in terms of there's a process and a procedure, and ultimately, or not ultimately, but sometimes the speaker will have to give a comment or a decision based upon whether or not it's appropriate or not. In this instance, he decided, but he gave the decision.
Well,
it would have to be a government bill.
The rules of the House.
Yes.
That's what we call standing orders. And the standing order simply says that only bills that require expenditure can only be introduced or support or introduced by the government.
Gotcha.
And so that was just him. And it wasn't that it wasn't like he just all of a sudden did it. It was he looked at it I did go to him.
Mm-hmm.
I did speak with him and say, our issue is I tried to talk to him. I tried to say, let's do this a different way,
Mm-hmm.
guys, because this bill is in out of order the way it's been submitted.
Yes.
And to say, and I said, we can withdraw it and say that we're now going to work on something bipartisan together and move forward. But that was something that I certainly did, and I did that, and I purposely did that in writing. So that wasn't a conversation. That was actual correspondence.
To show that you and the opposition have
I
talked.
said, listen,
Okay.
I will stand next to Mr. Robinson and say, thank you guys for coming on board. Let's work on this together. But unfortunately, it was not taken up. That doesn't mean that there isn't room. And even on the day, I reached out to Mr. Robinson and said, offer still stands, come on board.
Yes.
And I'm up to this point, I'm still waiting for a response to that from the opposition.
Enough. Again, I think that's important because, and in Bermuda, a lot of times what happens is, in the moment, we all energize and do things, but then as time goes away, we tend to stop, set back, and not let things take place until the next election, for example, in this instance, which is unfortunate. And so, to the listening audience, I would encourage you that as you hear of any public commentaries or you want to attend any meetings hosted or at least attended by the minister, please go and do so, because it doesn't make sense to sit back and just complain, as opposed to be present, be in the moment, and ask information in that sense. And you'll be surprised at when one comment is made, how it does spur comments by others. And so that would be my encouragement. And so, to listening audience, again, the guest this evening is the Honorable Delaware Ben, who's the Minister of, what's your full title? Minister of?
The Minister for. It's weird because everybody else is Minister of, but mine says Minister for Cabinet Office and Digital Innovation.
Okay, let's get that right. I should do that, but for Cabinet and Digital Innovation. And that's why we will talk about this later, I suppose. Just a minute. In terms of you and your digital expertise or your digital familiarity, because it is part of your portfolio. So the next pillar is, I'm not going to do the next one, I'm going to go further because I want to come back to the funding aspect. I think that's going to be very, very interesting. Let's talk on pillar 3, which is the election day and the voting process.
Right. And so I gave a little intro to that, and that is to just regularize what happens at the polls on the day. And so there is a strict manual. Well, what we're looking at is a playbook that says this is what happens inside and outside of our polling stations. One of the complaints that I have had from both, and talking to candidates from both parties, is this was one of the more interesting elections I've been in, because it's just so different. It felt so different from before, and in some cases there was somebody was saying I was told I couldn't have my tent. In other cases, and I was like, well, we had tents all over the place. People, you can't wear green, you can't wear red. In other places, everybody wears green. So it was this sort of hodgepodge of things. And so after having conversations with the parliamentary registrar, it really seemed like that part of while the inside is governed by the Parliamentary Elections Act. Outside is governed by, this is what kind of always happened.
Someone's opinion,
right? And it was subject. It seemed like it was subject to opinion in some cases. And so that's no knock on the Parliamentary Registrar and her team for doing their work. But if in the absence of guardrails, people will make their best guesses and their best estimates on what should and shouldn't happen. You've run and you've known,
I got that. Move your tent, don't move your tent.
Bermuda fields, you have your tent, and you have
your food.
You have food is there. And some people want to sit off and have a tea and a biscuit and all that stuff. I know that happened in my tent. My tent this election, but I was made to understand in some people's tent, they were told they can't hang around. You got to vote. You got to go home. Right? And so I was like, that was just really odd. To hear that's how it went down. But and so that's one of the things we said. We have opportunities to clarify that. So let's just go ahead and put that in writing.
Again, people might not know this because it happens on the day, though, whereby you try to get there early, you choose your spot, which you think is the greatest vantage point. But then there is sometimes the idea of, guess what, you must move back, or you must move your tent, which is a bit of irritation, to be honest, because by then you're set up for the day. Got your chairs, got your table, whatever, and you've chosen your spot. And so I think for the listening audience is to understand and appreciate that sometimes it was based upon somebody's opinion, as opposed to what you can and cannot do, as opposed to this is what the law is, this is what the guidelines are, and follow that. And so that did cause some frustration. And even this time around, because in many cases, right, there was more than two candidates.
Right.
And so you had to find even more space.
You had to find even more space. We had one election where I believe there were 5.
That's right. That's
candidates in the same, right, trying to, and some of our things, and when we also talk about that, and we want to expand beyond that, like some of the things that we're getting from other jurisdictions is, and one of the things that we mentioned in the town hall meetings that people seem to kind of, and it really makes them go, is we've looked at jurisdictions where elections are only allowed to be held on Saturdays.
Well,
and so that removes the, okay, what I'm going to do with my child because I'm going to go work sort of thing when they're held during a work day. And so while it doesn't eliminate it, because obviously some people work on Saturdays as well, but it's different.
Yes.
And they also have, there are other places where you pick your polling booths, and because there's a strict set of regulations of what those polling booths must have, they must be accessible. They must have restrooms for candidates. They must have Wi-Fi. Different things. So these are the types of things where we say, well, if we know it's going to be on a Saturday, that buildings, and if we say it's always just in a school, we know that school's available on a Saturday. Things can be done in advance to ensure that building is suitable for a poll. If you're saying it has to have all these other things, so those are some of the interesting nooks. I think one thing that I think you would probably support is we were shocked to find in one of our Caribbean neighbors, two of our Caribbean neighbors, that on election day the sale of alcohol is banned.
Oh. Oh my goodness, that'd be something. That would be something. You're right.
I was like, that's a surefire way to lose an election in Bermuda, wouldn't it?
Unfortunately, yeah, right. Yeah.
But it was interesting now, doing this research and seeing some of the nuances. And when I say Bermudianize, that's what I'm talking about. Like, you don't want to just. One thing that people are fearful of is, and it happens far too often when we talk about change in Bermuda, is we look at somewhere else and let's just do this here.
Yes, that's right.
Without looking at, okay, that's a nice concept, but how does it fit within our Bermudian culture?
Gotcha.
Right? And so you have to be very careful. And that's some of the things I learned from my previous portfolio is we can't just say this is where we're going. It has to be shaped within the Bermudian context. So it's more amenable for people. And so you don't get the pushback of, you're just doing this because they did it over there. You're like, no. We like what they're doing, but we have to see how does that work with what we're doing.
Understood.
So we can still have our cultural feel about things. And it's really important for us to, if we're saying that outside the polling booth must look like this, how does that fit into granny that wants to come and sit in your tent and chill with you all day because that's their outing, and that's what they do. We also want to widen the voting. When we talk about this kind of fits in his and the previous one, voter access of widening the franchise. And so when widening the franchise is this particular election was quite quite interesting of some of the data that we have from that. And I find my sheet with the data. We had 110 candidates, 27 independents. There's a strong demand for flexibility. Over 3,000 people used advanced polling, including 400 travelers. Assisted voting also was used as well, with 188 supported in homes and institutions. What that tells us is people are apt to accept alternative ways to vote.
Yes.
And in some jurisdictions we've looked at, they give you the option. If you want to vote in the advanced poll, why not?
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Just go ahead. If you don't want to, because if you don't want to vote on the day, you want to vote in the advance, go ahead.
Sure.
Right? Now, that's the type of stuff he's like, well, does that fit into the Bermudian context?
Yeah.
That's something that we would want. Because I know I had a constituent who turned 101 on election day. And I said, well, you can vote in advance.
Right.
Show up in the age. And he was like, no. I'll be there on the day.
Okay,
right?
fair enough.
And then I had a younger person who was like, I wish I could vote in the advance because I can't get time off from work. And, and you're talking about that sort of stuff, right? So it's not just an age thing. It's also a convenience thing for some people. Other persons talked about, I flew away the day before the advance poll. when we talk about absentee balloting, why couldn't a person like that use absentee balloting?
Okay.
You know, they're legitimately planning to vote. They just wouldn't dare. But one of the things that, Anthony, that was pointed out in our sessions as well is a lot of these regulations around voting and how long the registration is, how long the advanced polling is, and blah, 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 is tied to nomination day.
Yes.
And so the day that seems to be the catalyst, whenever nomination day is, seems to be the catalyst of how all this other stuff kind of fits into it.
Yes.
And so one suggestion was, well, why not look at nomination day? Why not say that
Move it to me.
if you're a party and you know that person wants you can come and say this person will be running in the race.
Mm-hmm.
They're running in the next election unless we say differently and declare them 4 years before if you want. You know,
Yeah.
so sort of thing. Because you remember how it works, right, Anthony?
Mm-hmm.
Parties roll out candidates well in advance of nomination day.
Some do, yes.
Well, in most part.
Yes.
Yeah, right? And they're rolled out. And even the independents are rolling themselves out before nomination day, you know, so why not why not create a regime where that nomination can be done differently? You could still have the Bermudian feel. I know with the Progressive Labor Party, we march from PLP headquarters and stuff. You could still actually do that.
Sure.
Even if you were filed your nomination papers 6 months in advance. That doesn't stop you from marching down.
That's right.
For the persons who might want to,
Sure.
you know, or they could, or they're doing they want to do theirs in the last minute, you know, and that it doesn't stop that. From happening, of having that parade and all that stuff. So there are things that you can tweak while still keeping the Bermudian feel.
And with that, there's a question here is that previously you had seniors would vote in the early voting day.
And they still do.
Right. But I'm saying that this year, I believe more people took advantage of that.
Yes.
And so the question then becomes, are you able to give a comment in terms of the likelihood of that being supported, that anybody can vote during the early election to make it easy? Actually, because it will smooth out on the day also.
Well, there hasn't been, I think in all of the town halls we've had, it's something that I brought up.
Yes, okay.
And it's not, I don't think it's something, because you think about it, that's like something we don't think about.
Yes.
Right? It's like, we're worrying about the people who are not in Bermuda. We're not worrying about the people who are here, sort of thing. And once it's mentioned, people are like, you know, that's not a bad idea, da, da, da. And so it is something that will be part of, you know, the ultimate discussion, I believe.
Okay.
But I can't hazard a guess to say that yay or nay on that. We'll just have to see once it's packaged. And again, I said the disappointment in the turnout so far that we've had. But I believe that once a package is more formalized, people would be much more keenly interested in providing those comments.
And by the way, how many town halls have you had so far? I know you've had town halls, but you've also had not lots, but you have had other more focused meetings.
Yeah, we've had, so town halls have, so we had two last week. Mm-hmm. We had two before the end of the year.
Okay.
One in November, one in December. We've had 3 online-ish meetings, 2 specifically with just students overseas. We're going to have 3 next week and one or two the following week. So next week on Monday, we're at Workman's. Mm-hmm. Tuesday, we're at Bermuda College. Thursday, we will be at Summers Isle Lodge near White Hill Field. Yeah. And then there's only one more, and that'll be at the boat club, West End Boat Club.
West End, yeah, gotcha.
Up west. So previously we've had Devil's Hill, we've had St. David's Primary, we've had Leopard's Club, and I'm gonna. Yeah, and Leopard's Club was last week. So St. David's and Leopard's Club was last week as well. And we've also had one at Cedar Bridge as well, in addition to the online, specifically online ones we've had.
And is there a reason why they push now? For example, there's a lot of meetings, right? Mm-hmm. Which you always be encouraged. But is there a reason like why such a concentration as opposed to being, I don't know, before?
Well, the idea is to have them back to back to back to build. Well, what I'm trying to do is build momentum and have them done and in the can by the end of January. So then we can use February to come back to pull together our working group and come back by the end of February to say, well, here's how all this information is now collated. Let's have those conversations, because the ultimate aim is that we promised that this would be passed through the legislature by September 2026. There are 2 sittings in September, because we already know all the sittings for the year.
Yes.
There are 2 sittings in September. The first one will be to lay this down, and the second one will be to pass this legislation.
Okay.
And so I don't know if anybody out there in radio land knows the difficulty in moving from policy to legislation, but it's not something that happens overnight. So the idea of doing this very, very quickly, so we can start the drafting process by May at the latest, so we can be ready for September.
Okay, September 2026. Okay, so are you able or intended to give comments about what you think will be supported in that area?
Right now, when people do come, they're mostly interested in absentee balloting,
okay,
and how it would work. Right, they ask questions about how it would work. We do talk about all the other things, and it's typically persons who are more involved in elections. That kind of their ears perk up when you start talking about election day and voting process.
You mean understanding?
Because they understand it. They're
yes.
like, I see where you're going here, and
right. Okay.
and that's where they'll kind of be jogged to say, well, when I was there, this happened, and I didn't like this, and blah blah blah, and sort of. So this last one at Lepers Club, we were fortunate to have someone who was an actual inside the club.
Yeah.
She was one of the agents.
Yes.
And she had her comments on, I didn't like how this happened, and da 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 da. So it was good. It was good to have that. And we also had a few candidates had come. And I will say these things have been attended by both PLP and OBA
sure.
Candidates and supporters as well. And so they're able to give a uniqueness that the ordinary citizen couldn't talk about election day and the things that happen on election day. We do get comments around the financing part.
That's a big one. Yeah,
you want to get back to
yes.
because that is the biggie for us, because there is nothing in our books that talks about financing.
Okay,
and it's typically been, and for the most part, our elections have been grassroots financed.
Okay. But don't go there yet, because that's my last one.
Okay.
I want to go to we talked about the election day and the voting process.
You're talking about, the next one was governance.
Right, I'm saying next one's going to be governance.
So electoral governance.
Oh, sorry. Before we go there,
Sure.
to the listener, I forgot to go back to the question. Question is with regards to students, and it reads thus: I'm okay with them voting if election is called, as long as, in quotes, they can show that they are enrolled at a valid college for that semester, unless they're an intern. Well, very particular. Unless they're an intern, and that must be current status. However, I do not agree that if a person is living overseas, they can't make a decision. For me, living in Bermuda. That's interesting. So this person's saying that they agree with it in the context of a student who's away temporarily, but if somebody lives overseas, like permanently, then that they can't, or I guess can't or should not participate.
Well, remember when I went back, and remember when I said that our election rules state that you must live in Bermuda for 6 months,
okay,
in order to remain on the register.
Okay.
Right. Mm-hmm. And so now you're getting into the, removing of persons from the register and stuff. And what I found, and this was actually a very long conversation at Lepers Club, is we do have rules in place to disqualify people from voting.
Yes.
But I would say people are very loath to enact those rules. For the fact of, I'd rather err on the side of this person is eligible to vote than disenfranchise someone and then to find out they are eligible to vote. And that's a Bermudian thing. It is a Bermudian thing because, you've seen, I've witnessed elections all the places, and I've actually heard one election all the places like, hey, you show up and you're not valid. Don't even walk in. Don't even walk in. Where in Bermuda, you show up is like, I forgot my license. I'm like, yeah, I knew that guy. And cool, and sort of thing. And so, but those things are technically Bermudianism.
Yes.
But they're not. They're actually not right. They're
But
not-
if you,
they're not-
but the law does exist to enforce the fact that
The law-
you turned up, no ID, you can't vote.
Right. The law does exist
Yes.
to do that, but it's very loath to
Sure.
kind of push that forward. But
Understood.
and one of the things that this research is, it appears that, and what I always find interesting, it's easier if you apply the law strict.
Yes.
It's easier to become a candidate than it is to stay on the voter roll.
Okay. Yes.
Right. And so and I find that interesting. It should be the other way around. It should be easier to
vote, yeah.
to keep your vote than it is to become a candidate to run. And one of the things that did come up is and something that I don't think people are willing to look at, Anthony, is should the bar to become a candidate be higher? Currently now, to become a candidate, all you have to do is find two people to sign your document.
Right.
To say they support you, and you could become a candidate. And so that was a question that was asked. It's like, well, should the bar be raised? Should there be a different threshold to become a viable candidate? And so that in itself, I believe, is one of those baby steps moves as we move forward, if that's something that that the public is got the stomach for.
Sure.
For sure. Because again, it's about, I'm a firm believer that if you feel that you got the rights to run. And it's funny because some of the questions people ask is like, well, what if the guy doesn't even live in the constituency? And he says, it's like, it's about canvassing.
Yes.
It's about, so if someone who doesn't live in your constituency has come and he's convinced the majority of the people in that constituency to vote for him, he deserves to be in.
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
For sure.
Let's look at it from that perspective. You're not always going to find somebody who lives next door to you.
And also, Bermuda is not that big anyway. You can always live outside, but be there all the time because your mother might stay there or a cousin or whatever, so you're frequently there. And you might even play on the sports team. So that, you're right, I got that point. So again, that's going to be interesting, especially around the candidate.
So I hope you do bring up the digital innovation part, because there is a tie in there as well.
Okay, well, you can talk digital too. I just want to go to the finance piece last, because I think that's a bigger, bigger, but a big topic. So if you want to talk about digital, that's fine.
Right. Well, the digital part, and then some of the questions that have come up is the difficulty in changing information. Because as the law is written now, if you move and you don't change your stuff within 30 days, you are breaking the law.
Okay.
Right. And you have people that go years without obtaining a new license, without changing their mailing address and all that stuff.
Yes. Okay.
Right. And it's just allowed to happen. But part of this is part of our digital innovation push is to create what we call a one-stop shop here for the Bermuda government. So once you change your information in one area, it matriculates throughout the government processes.
Sure.
And so you can get updated. Things can get updated that way. Another way that was asked, and this is something we have to really pursue, is why can't you track someone who's left and not come back? Because doesn't everybody have to swipe their passport when they leave?
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And then swipe it when you come back. So if you swiped it and you're gone, and there's no record of you swiping it coming back, that means you're gone. Off the register you go, sort of thing. And so that was something that someone had asked. And I was like, I actually never thought of it from that perspective, but perhaps there is something there.
But again, dude, if you want to give comment in terms of, I am Bermudian for the past, I would say 30 or 40 years. I go overseas to live and do what I'm doing. Why does that necessarily cause me not to know or think or care or have good input to Bermuda, whereby I should be able to cast my vote?
Well, in virtually every country where residents who do not live in the country still participate to vote, pay some form of taxes to the country.
Okay.
So if you leave and you have zero input into in this case, let's say the consolidated fund, by paying taxes and blah 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 in any way, shape, or form.
Yes.
Should you then have the ability to vote over what government will be in place to spend that money?
Oh, and again, for me, it's interesting because living overseas does not mean that I am no longer Bermudian. It does not mean I have no family here.
Absolutely
It does
not.
not mean that I am not aware of things taking place. And so, again, it'll be interesting to see what is decided at the end of the day in terms of can Bermudians, period, vote.
And then the other part would be, you've left Bermuda for 20 years.
Mm.
What constituency would you vote in?
Okay.
Right. That's another
yes.
question that came up.
Sure.
Like, well, if my uncle moved away, he's been there for 20 years, where would he register to vote?
Now, that, in my mind, would be a legitimate conversation because you're right. Where will they vote? Because then, to the listening audience, sometimes the seats are won or lost in very small numbers.
Right.
10, 12, I don't know about 5, but anyway. And so you could imagine,
Remember,
potentially, it could be skewed to win or lose.
The government changed hands in 2012, in the 2012 election, by 4 votes.
Gotcha.
The government changed from Progressive Labour Party to One Breed Alliance by 4 votes.
Okay. Well, that's quite sobering, to be honest. So again, it's quite possible if we allow it to be, as you I think said earlier, too wide open, you might actually skew the election based upon the vote of quote unquote a non-resident, but yeah, non-resident. So that's okay. That helps to helps me to focus on why it is so important.
Right.
Even though I already know that every vote's important, because you'd be surprised, like say cumulatively rather, how you can lose your seat without too many people. So okay, well done. Again, to listening audience, thank you for joining us here on Magic 102.7 on your Sunday evening for another edition of Insight. Our guest this evening is the Honorable Diallo Riban, who's the Minister for Cabinet and Digital Innovation. What I'm going to do is take a slight diversion here and let him talk about the digital innovation piece of his responsibility, and they're going to come back and talk about campaign finance. And one question, Minister, in preparing for the finance piece is, if you can, give a broad reference to what does it cost to run an election from the government side, not so much the government, but I mean from the party side, so people have an appreciation for what is spent, how much money is spent in a Bermuda election.
Now you've asked me a question I absolutely don't know the answer to.
You don't? Oh, no.
I actually don't.
Okay.
I can tell you candidates themselves may spend anywhere up to $10,000. And which may seem like not that much money from, in the grand scheme of things. But, some candidates will certainly, out of their own pocket, pay that to do their own stuff for their constituency and different things, and most candidates do get donors as well, and they have they reach out to persons who donate to their campaign to help them win. But what we don't have, and it's interesting that Bermuda being the financial capital that it is.
Remember, this is meant to be digital innovation first, and they will do finance.
Okay. Well, the only part about the digital innovation I did want to speak is about the one-stop shop that we're working on now. We currently have, you may or may not have been aware of the contract that we signed with Paradise Mobile and Google to actually come and assist us with this work. That's kind of been going on for the last couple of years, but we realized, man, you need external expertise to assist with that, and so they are online now and started their started their 100-day sprint to continue with the getting us toward the one-stop shop. So for those listening, the one-stop shop the idea is that you'll be able to log on using your cell phone or your computer, log on to government services and do a lot of the things that currently now you find yourself running around from department, whether it is you're bringing the same information to 2 different departments and that sort of thing. We'll also looking to digitize government processes, and so all of these paper forms and the like will slowly disappear, and all of this stuff will be done electronically. One thing, Anthony, I do want to say is that it's been brought up is, okay, all this electronic stuff is great, but what about our seniors?
Yes.
What about our seniors? And so there has to be some look to how that can be mitigated as well, whether providing support systems. I do know through Minister Ferbert's ministry that there are support systems in place for seniors for electronic usage and different things like that.
Yes.
But we'll certainly be looking to expand on how that works in the future. One of the ideas that have often been bounced around is why not utilize our, the the usage of mail is dropping.
Yes, 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 yes.
Paper mail, but we do have all these buildings around. Want to have these as digital hubs for seniors to visit and actually have persons that can help them through various forms and different things like that. And so the idea of being able to transact with the government digitally versus having to get up, go somewhere to actually conduct a transaction is crazy. It's, I wouldn't say it's crazy because we're used to it.
Yes, yes, yes.
But it is certainly can be done much more efficiently when you really, really think that in this day and age, we are still, having to go to a cashier, pay in cash, get your receipt, and then carry it back to a department and say, I paid, sort of thing, when in most countries that is just electronic.
Gotcha.
Even if it's paid in cash, it's still electronic.
One of those things, though, to the listening audience would be to remember that some persons we see are elderly, they understand technology. And so don't count them out. And on the flip side, is that some of these social requirements represent social interaction for our seniors. And so when it comes for the 15th of each month, if that's a weekday, you'd be surprised how many people gather at the bank, for example, because they get their pension checks, but it's more a social event, sit around and talk and things. And so, as you said earlier, when it comes to this Bermudanization piece or the cultural aspect, please be mindful of that. Okay, so now, Minister, we've talked about almost everything.
I'll get into the part that you like.
Right, well, the financial piece, right?
Yes.
So, Paul, I'll let you speak first of all, though, in terms of you called it campaign and political financing in the context of elections. So talk about that in the first instance, and then I'll ask some questions as we go.
Sure. Interestingly, that Bermuda doesn't have what we would call campaign financing rules that are in place that strictly talk to what is a donation to a campaign, or how can these be regulated? How do you know it's coming from legitimate sources versus some illegitimate source? And every single Bermudian, regardless of who you are, if you have a bank account, you know what it's like to do those KYC, KYC things on a regular basis. And so as a financial jurisdiction such as Bermuda, with all of the anti-money laundering and stuff that's in place, the fact that there's nothing around campaign financing as of yet. And so what was interesting was a comment that I received from someone where we talked about this, and this was a one-on-one conversation I was having with the person, and they said, I would love to donate to a political party, but I feel that if anyone found out, there would be backlash if I got a government contract.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
And it was like, and this was someone who gets contracts from government on a regular basis because they do a very specialized type of work.
Yes.
And so, but they were fearful that if I did make a donation, right, because, they're politically aware and savvy and stuff, if I did make a donation, that could be then used against me if I got a contract. And so, but if things are regulated and things are put in place that says this is the maximum you can do and everybody can donate up to this or however it's going to shape, right? I'm throwing out ideas based on some of the documentation that we've gathered on what's done in other jurisdictions. But if you level the playing field like that, you know that there is, it comes down to, as I said when I first spoke about this, it comes down to my ideas do my ideas speak to you better than the other person's ideas versus, this person's just got, I came home today and I found grocery vouchers stuffed in my mailbox. So sort of thing. And it didn't come. I know it didn't come from that guy over there, but And so you want to kind of put some sort of regulations around that. And it's curious that we're not going into areas that haven't been explored.
Right.
When we looked at Cayman has very, very strict campaign regulations. Believe it or not, because I was mentioning this to someone else, Jamaica has campaign financing laws. And every time I say this, they do. Are you sure? I was like, yes, they actually do. And even with them, they actually fund candidates. Everybody gets money. So everybody has the same starting out.
Gotcha, yes.
You know, you can go raise more if you wish, but everybody gets the same. So they all start at the same starting line, but others will enhance that with whether it be personal or whatever. And so there are other ones, but what we're basing this on, and we will base it on, is all Commonwealth parliaments belong to an association called CPA, the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association.
Yes.
And they publish benchmarks on how these things should be done and what's best practices. And so we are looking at all of the stuff that we are doing. We're actually benchmarking it against what they consider best practices to see where improvements could be made or where we are hitting the marks. And on the campaign financing one, we are not touching any of the marks because we just simply don't do it. We simply don't. And so when we have these conversations at the town hall, you know, the person's like, well, if I give $20, will I be named? And I'm like, at this point, I don't know. It's highly unlikely that is how this works based on the documentation that I've read, you know, where, you know, it's like you have to pick a threshold. And of course, I come back to the Bermudianism. Where does that threshold lie in Bermuda? The threshold in Jamaica might not be the threshold in Bermuda. You know?
Yes.
You know, so we can't just say, well, Jamaica does $50, so we're going to do $50. When, you know, here, it might be $5,000. You know, it actually doesn't, you just don't know this stuff. But as we collect more data, and I will say that this is something that we're actually bringing someone on specifically to do this research for us.
Well,
We're actually going to bring someone. We're actually I was hoping to have him in place by January 1st, but now we're looking at February 1st, and they're specifically charged with it's a Bermudian.
No,
They're specifically charged with doing this research into all other jurisdictions, into the CPA benchmarks, and then come back with, you know, what it could look like in Bermuda.
for the finance piece or all of them?
For the finance piece specifically.
Oh, and you know, I'm saying wow or surprised because clearly, if you bring somebody on to do it, no matter what their arrangement is, right, it means that there is a lot more work to it than we might originally think about it.
For sure.
And the fact that, quote unquote, everybody is very serious about this.
Yes. Well, we are very serious. I am very serious about this. It's as ministers, we get what we call ministerial charges.
Yes.
Right, and that's basically your report card that says here are the things that you need to. Here are the things that you will accomplish. And here are the dates by the time you're
set by the premier, of course.
Set by the premier. Of course, you have in conversations like, well, this is, you know, and so you have a to and fro, and then you come up with a final list of deliverables.
Okay.
And so that's why it's serious to me. It's always been serious to me, and it's so far as one of the first things I started when I was appointed.
Okay.
And my first meeting with the parliamentary registrar can go way back. I was appointed in third week in February.
After election, yes.
Yeah, then it was budget stuff. And then we did the budget in May. Right after the budget, my first meeting, that's when I met with the parliamentary registrar to say, you know, we're moving with this, and we're going to need the assistance from you. And so meeting with her was more of getting a feel for how elections are run in Bermuda. What are the pros? What are the cons? Where the pain points are for her, and where she feels it's easy and stuff. Because the legislative and policy part is the politicians.
Yes.
But the running of the elections is independent of politicians and the government, and it's run by the parliamentary registrar, who reports to the governor.
And that was my question, by the way, to ask for the listening audience, who's in charge of the actual election? You said it, but talk about it a little bit more so we understand.
The parliamentary registrar is, so we have what we call independent bodies here in Bermuda. So most people, when we talk about independent bodies, they know of the Auditor General.
Yes.
Everybody knows the Auditor General. Everybody knows the Ombudsman. You know, and so, but they don't know, or they might know about PATI.
Privacy, yes.
PATI. And now PIPA. Everybody knows about PIPA, privacy, personal information, privacy stuff. And so these are independent offices, whereas they're funded by the government, but they don't necessarily report to the government.
Yes.
They legally report to the governor. However, but the legislation that's put in place that governs how they run is done by the legislature.
Yes.
But it's slightly different because we do have to have conversation with the governor if we want to change this legislation. But I've, in my time as a minister, I've done a few things where I've had to talk to the governor and say, hey, we want to do this, blah, blah, blah. And gotten their support to say, okay, this sounds reasonable. Boom, go ahead.
Yes.
Right. And so that's how our elections are run. They are completely independent of politics.
Yes.
And what we're doing in this, when we talk about electoral governance and oversight, is providing more resources and more ability for more strengthening of the independence of our elections.
Yes.
So going back to the finances, Anthony, what we do note is in most places there is a election finance commission or committee that actually that is again one of these separate type offices that rule over that, and they're the ones that make the rules around election campaign financing and the like, and then put that together. I know if you do like reading, I'll send you the 80-page document from Jamaica. Which,
Sure.
Which surprised me, man. It was like they actually give money to candidates.
Yes, I just wrote that note, by the way.
I remember mentioning it to someone. They're like, "Good luck doing that in Bermuda."
Yeah.
Right. Because then
Do you know how much they give, by the way?
I don't.
Okay.
I actually don't. Like we said, we didn't go into the granular part of that.
Yes.
We were just looking at the very high level stuff at this point.
Yes.
To see like, well, what is because what I don't want to do is kind of be influenced by what the actual numbers are in other places. But
Okay.
we do, but it'll be part of it, and that's the stuff we'll have the person we're bringing on to do that actual
Okay.
research, do that actual research for us. But it is very interesting but campaign financing and election financing is something in most modern democracies does exist because there is some idea of leveling the playing field. But just like anywhere else, you want to do it in such a way that it doesn't create all these loopholes for people. You see in the States it's absolutely bonkers where,
Right.
Elon Musk can give, $20 million,
Yes.
whereas every time somebody gives $25, the name's recorded and and their email and stuff is taken on board. So we want it to be as Bermudian as possible.
Yes.
And not really interfere with the Bermudianness of our elections, but we also want to make sure that there are proper guardrails.
And part of what you just said piqued my interest in terms of if we think just generally speaking, right, that leveling the playing field is more in the interest of the PLP than the OBA or the former UBP because they would have, quote unquote, all the money to support them. So it's interesting that the PLP have been challenged to put in place the legislation and that you are now moving ahead.
Right.
Because it appears as if that's going to cause, in my words, I guess, the OBA to potentially have less money to run their election if it balances off.
I wouldn't necessarily say that. I don't know how much. I don't know because we don't know. We don't know how much money people raise.
Right.
We just simply don't know, and we could be affecting the Progressive Labour Party as much as we're affecting the One Bermuda Alliance when we do this. So that's why this has to be. And you heard me continue to say this has to be bipartisan. What in a perfect world when we go to the House to debate this, it should be all of us standing up saying, "I'm glad we finally got this done.
Yes,
good going." And comments are all around. This is the best thing that we've ever done, or and I fully support and move forward. Versus, well, how come you're doing this versus that? How come you're doing this versus that? And that's why, for me, this has always been a bipartisan thing. And the offer to the One Bermuda Alliance will always remain because once we get down to the working group portion, that's when we really want all the dissenting voices in the room, so we can account for the dissenters in what it is we finally move forward. I'm not naive enough to think that miraculously I'm going to come up with something, or we will come up with something that everybody 1,000% supports.
Yes.
But I do want to know that we came up with something that everyone had their input, and they can get up and grumble and say, well, I thought the threshold should be $1 million, but it's a 500,000 sort of thing, so they can still have that conversation. But at the end of the day, we're still moving forward with what us as a people generally support and think is the right things to do as we move forward.
Okay, that's my mind. It's interesting, but at this point in time, I think it's correct that people are a little bit hesitant to donate because it then means that the name becomes public. What exists now, though, in terms of that being true? Do I have to publicly declare my support or the fact that I've given money to either of the parties?
No, there's nothing. There's nothing in law now that says you must declare who you are. I mean, we all remember Jetgate, right?
Yeah, well.
We all remember Jetgate, and
Yes.
and all of the. I mean, and think about that. That was what, $50,000.
Not much.
And you know the uproar about that because it was what could have been a legitimate donation,
Yeah.
then turned into this
A really big political football.
really big political
Yes.
sawdry affair sort of thing. But just imagine if there were rules in place that said Anthony Richardson gave $50,000 to the One Burrito Alliance. You know, and he's filed whatever paperwork needs to be filed to say that he's not this or that. And you're like, okay, you know, you've done it. You followed the rules. We put rules in place that said if you want to donate this is what you need to do, and you did all of that.
Wow.
You know,
and so is that the like the push in terms of the finance piece to at least have people declare? Like, what's the biggest piece of that? Like, what's
the biggest piece of that, and you heard me say it's as what we and I want to say this is keeping in my theme of keeping our elections Bermudian. You don't want undue influence to govern the outcome of an election.
Sure.
That's really what you want. And one of the ways of doing that is putting those regulations in place. And so what you got to do it in a way that doesn't discourage people from donating.
Right.
But also puts things in place that says, well, here's some guardrails around how those donations can be received and how they can be used.
Interesting. Good evening, caller. Thank you for your patience. What's your question or comment?
Yes, good evening, gentlemen. Good evening to Minister and Mr. Richardson. I just want to know that you're saying keep it Bermudian and regulations in place. Who is allowed to vote in our election? And, you know, who has the right to vote in the election? And
Okay.
how far they be able to go as a voter or as a person that's living on the island or in the island or Bermudian or non-Bermudian.
Okay.
What's their position in how far they can go in the sense of becoming premier? So I'd like to know that.
Okay. Thank you, caller.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bit of feedback, but thank you. That's interesting in terms of who can vote.
Right. Well, the only people that can vote are persons that are legitimately on the voter registration roll. And you have to be a Bermudian to get on that roll. You can, if you've obtained Bermudianism by if you're, got your Bermudian status, then you can be entered into that roll. Also, the rule is you must be living on the island at least 6 months.
Yes.
6 months. I always say 6 months, 1 day.
Sure.
To be eligible. I will say that there is always concern about that particular rule because there are people that fly back to Bermuda to vote.
Yes, of course.
They fly back. They don't live here, but they fly back to vote because they've never been taken off the register.
Yes.
There's also part of this that we didn't get into is how do we clean up the register? How do we get the register as accurate as possible? And that's another thing that we intend to look at. Whether we're doing that using technology, whether we're making changes on how the register is updated on a regular basis. Right now, it is a labor-intensive process to remove someone from the register, even though they may legitimately deserve to be removed. And so all candidates out there will tell you that if they do canvass, they've come across someone who's never lived in a location, but they continuously show up as living in that location.
Right. Hold on, caller. That's interesting, though, in terms of So residents can vote if you're a Bermudian, quote unquote, and it could be by birth or by
Status.
PRC or whatever. But
No,
it's
not PRC.
I'm not sorry, not PRP. I'm sorry. Jeez, sorry. As long as you are legitimately a Bermudian, however defined, you can
Yeah.
then vote. Have to be registered.
And you have to register.
Right. And what's critical what's critical is the idea that people move.
Right.
And so I'll come back to that because that's a
that's
big
a
one
huge issue.
from voting.
That's
I mean, from
huge.
canvassing rather, because you go around, you say, well, Diallo used to stay at number 2 Somersault Road, for example. He's not there, but then he stays somewhere in a different jurisdiction almost. How do I get him off or on? And people, I want you to give comments in terms of how often it happens and what we end up doing when we can't do anything. So hold on for that, though. Good evening, caller. Welcome to Insight. What's your question or comment?
Well, it's me back again. I just
Oh,
wanted
no.
to note the
Good.
minister mentioned
Yes.
in the sense of you could be a paper Bermudian, so to speak, or have been added to the
Yes.
right now. Now, how far could that go? Could that same person then run as a minister or be elected to become a minister or go out to vote or for a different party or parties that's out there to say that is on the register,
I got you.
where's the stoppage? Where's the protection for the next generation when things like that happen? Just asking that question, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. And there is some restriction in terms of
But there
citizenship.
is the eligibility
Mm-hmm.
to be a candidate is something that is within the Electoral Act and in the Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do believe that once you are a Bermudian,
Mm-hmm.
deemed a Bermudian, that you are eligible to run in
Mm-hmm.
an election. So I'm not quite sure where we're headed with that when he says how far back does that
Well, I think from what I recall, not the only, but one of the quote unquote big ones was Dr. Brown when he came back because he is Bermudian. He had gone overseas, got his U.S. citizenship, and he came back and I think he
They had to
renounced.
rescind. You had to rescind
Yeah.
they made him rescind his U.S. citizenship.
But was that actually like for political expedience or was it required legally?
That actually I don't know.
Okay.
I will I'll certainly look that up. I actually don't know the answer to that question. And it's curious because we've made we've announced it in our town hall meetings that this process is not about touching the candidate process.
Okay.
It's not about touching the candidate. So that's why I just don't know. It's not something we've done
That's interesting.
reading yet because
Sure.
one of the things we talked about was, is 36 too many? Should it be removed? Should it be lowered? But that's a constitutional matter
Okay.
that needs to. So once that was deemed a constitutional matter and not part of electoral reform, that kind of fell off the radar of looking at
Sure.
candidate eligibility and different things like that. So I do apologize to that caller, but we will. I'll definitely look it up. So I might get asked that again. He might show up in one of our town halls.
For sure. But I mean, obviously, but in terms of the whether you have how you become Bermudian is not as much an issue as are you Bermudian. And once you run, you can run. You can be a candidate, you can be a minister, you can be the premier, whatever you
Right.
choose after that.
Once you run,
Yeah.
you're elected to Parliament. If your party forms the government, you are eligible to be. Well, you know what? I take that back because as the OBA attempted to do, you can name ministers can come from any member of Parliament, so they don't have to be in your party to be a minister in your team.
Good point. Let's take this call and come back to that because I know that there was the offer
There was the offer by the One Bermuda Alliance.
to make some of the PLP ministers candidates. I mean, ministers actually. So let's take this call first and come back to that. Good evening, caller. Welcome to Insight. What's your question or comment?
Just to finish, I think that part where you can be elected and become premier, that's the part I would like to see some electrical reform because in America, being and you want to bring up all the other countries and what they're doing and how they go about their campaigning, in the sense of you can become governor, go as far as being governor in the United States of America, but you cannot run for president.
Okay, fair enough.
So
Fair
I'm
enough.
just saying that needs to be having a serious look at it in the sense of how you're saying this campaign money and this and that and the other, because that could lead to a whole lot of other things as well.
Okay.
So I think that part there needs to be looked at due to the next generation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, caller. I'm not sure that in terms of the next generation, I mean, the good thing about life is you get older, and so you have to retire at some point.
The thing we must understand is we are bicameral Westminster system versus a republic like the U.S. And the U.S. has different. So in the U.S., there are different rules at the federal level, at the state level, at the local level. So they can have different rules in place. We only have one level.
Yes.
And that is the House of Parliament. That is the only level we have. And once you are elected to the House of Parliament, you are eligible to become the premier. What people don't know, and I guess we're getting back to our civics lessons here, is the premier is picked from the one person within the House of Assembly that commands the majority, that commands the majority of the MPs. So while it has never happened, it is a possibility that the premier is not the leader of the party.
Yes.
Right? And so there are all sorts of nuances that go into that. But to answer that caller's question is, we only have one level of government, and that is the House of Assembly. And any person who's been duly elected to the House of Assembly, whether they were born Bermudian or they became Bermudian through status grant, as long as they are eligible to run for office and they are voted into a constituency, they are eligible to become the premier of the country.
As an aside, are you aware of? I'm sorry, not are you aware, but is there any current MPs that are by status?
That I can't.
Just a question of
that I cannot say.
Gotcha. Now, if you go back to your comment just now, which I know is true, is that when the OBA won in 2012, there was it a real
that we will never
approach?
Know. That we will never know.
To a point, I know it was said right.
They said that they had approached. They had approached some Bermuda, MP,
of course.
MP to offer them a cabinet post. So, but whether it happened or not, I can't say.
Gotcha. But I think what's interesting is that it can't happen. It can't happen.
It certainly can.
In terms, there's no reason why not. There is no. We have not done that traditionally, but there's no reason legally why it can't happen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you look at other Caribbean countries where they've you've had what you would call a coalition government.
Yes.
You know? So it is very, very possible to have a coalition government. If you're barely across the line and you're trying to shore up your votes.
Yes.
But that would typically work when you have more than. It will only work when you have more than two parties running.
I mean, to be honest, without going too far into that would have been the idea this time around, last year this time, in terms of you have some candidates, so the PLP doesn't get the majority, and between the OBA or another other party, they have enough to come together and form the government.
Exactly.
Yeah, which was one of the tactics, as you say, but unfortunately, there were a few, as you called it, pseudo parties in the mix during that time frame. Okay, you clarified already that this electoral reform process is not going to touch the actual candidates.
Right.
It's more the election process.
Yes.
I think that's an important point to make. Now let's talk a little bit more in terms of, as you spoke about it earlier, right? As one of the pillars, which was going to be, I think, voter access and the registration process. What do you do? What's been happening? What thoughts are coming out in terms of people in Bermuda having moved, as you said?
Right.
You go canvassing, Anthony's no longer there.
Well, that's what, and we touched on that when I talked about the one-stop shop.
Yes.
Of registering. Again, that's a Bermudian thing. I move, but I don't change my license.
Right.
I don't change. I don't change stuff until something comes up and I have to.
Correct.
Sort of thing. Now, how do we address that? That's not a habit that's going to be corrected overnight. And so currently as it stands, Anthony, currently as it stands, there is a scrutineer process that's built into this. And parties are supposed to supply scrutineers.
Yes.
So scrutineers are supposed to go and actually do that work. And candidates come and canvass. I canvass, and Anthony's, I've been there several times over the last year, and they definitely said Anthony's moved. The scrutineer is then supposed to kind of file that with the registrar.
Yes.
Then there's a process where they attempt to reach Anthony.
Yes.
And to say, hey, we've got knowledge that you've moved. And then it gets to a point where Anthony either has acknowledge his moves or they can't find Anthony, and then Anthony can be strucken from the from the list. And you will recall me saying people are loath to do that.
Correct.
Because we know Anthony's still in Bermuda.
Yes.
Somewhere, right? He's just not responding to these calls being put out. Perhaps the use of technology could do that, because right now you publish something in the newspaper and say, I'm looking for you, Anthony. Here are people who've who we believe have moved. You need to report to us in X amount of days. And Anthony might never read the newspaper.
Sure.
Right, sort of thing. And so when we talk about registration, coming up with a better process of that part of locating Anthony.
Yes.
Because here's the thing, right? If Anthony's in Bermuda and Anthony's working, somebody's paying payroll tax for Anthony.
Yes,
someone's paying social insurance for Anthony. Someone's paying pension for Anthony. Anthony might have stubbed his toe and gone to the hospital, so there's a record that Anthony does exist somewhere, sort of thing. How do we use technology while maintaining people's privacy to update our register? That is a huge question.
Especially now, yeah.
That's a huge question that we have in front of us. And I personally believe that some of this starts with education. And the education part is the importance of voting correctly. Voting and elections have consequences. And I don't think we drive that home enough to persons, because you can be, some people vote because of the matter that's popular at the moment.
Yes.
Some people vote because they're like, okay, I'm looking at what these guys are saying they're going to do, and it's weird depending on what part of life you're in. That I find when you're canvassing. So like when you're talking to a 60-year-old, they're thinking about retirement, what's happening, what's going to be happening 5-10 years from now.
Yes.
And that's how they're looking at this. You're talking to a younger person, they're like, none of this stuff's going to affect me. But yeah, you're going to put speed bumps in my neighborhood? I'm cool.
Yes.
I got my vote sort of thing. And so it's that's why I say the education part is you got to balance the instant gratification and the long-term expectations that you have, and kind of getting people to understand the difference between the two. But I think part of it is a lot of times we'll find some of the messaging that we're bombarded with, especially a person who's trying to be the government.
Right.
Will tend to focus on the immediate gratifying things and kind of hype that up,
Right.
You'll say, why are you gonna vote for those guys? There's a pothole in the road.
Right. Which, yes.
But at the end of the day, and so you typically have the governor of the day saying, we're fixing the potholes, but look at what the trajectory is for the next 10 years, or what's going to happen and the things we're putting in place. And so there's always that balancing act of addressing the immediate, but also getting persons to understand what the long term is going to look like.
Okay. And the other one I was going to ask about, sorry, I was going to be, so again, you said that there's not been much, I want to put my words, I guess, a lot of interest in this. Although we know that when it came out last time, there was a huge amount of outcry, if I will use the correct words, around the absentee voters.
Well,
student voters, I should say.
I would say, right, and I'm going to choose my words very carefully here. Volume and outcry are two different metrics. And
I hear you.
And amount of outcry are two different metrics.
Yes.
We have a lot of volume around that. I know, and I'm going to speak from my personal one. So when the election was announced and you heard the uproar of students being voted, I went to, and as you know, you look at your constituency list, and so I said, how many of my constituents are under 24? And I had 10 out of almost 1,300 people.
Yes.
There are 10. Right now it's like, right, there's not that big of a group here. I would say now And I want to say, I will say that there was an effort to register young people.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yes.
Actually, there was an effort, and I do recall participating in two of those. I was at Bermuda College, talking to students and saying, "Hey, put your name down and stuff." And I was actually excited to. A couple of people were in my constituency, and I was excited to see them come on the day and vote.
Yes.
I hope they voted for me, but I did see them come.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
And so right now, Anthony, and the listening public, there are about 1,800 voters under the age of 24 registered in Bermuda.
Okay.
Out of 45,000 registered voters, which is a very small percentage.
Wow.
I am hoping there are more, and they just haven't registered. But again, it goes back to when I said there is a different metric in loudness
for sure,
of outcry
Yes.
and volume of outcry. And so, what we're seeing is, and I've talked to parents like, yeah, I'm encouraging my child to come to the thing, but they don't want to,
They're not interested.
They're not interested in it. But this doesn't discourage us from knowing that the right thing is to put in place the option for students who are currently legitimately in school and legitimately residents of Bermuda to vote. And we will move forward with that regardless of whatever.
Okay.
We will move forward with that, but we will also put in place very stringent guidelines on how you are eligible to vote. Because like I said, what we don't want is someone
That's interesting.
who's not here, who doesn't live here,
Right.
but they enroll in school and say, I'm a Bermudian in school.
Okay.
Put me on the register.
So that's sometimes what happens is we hear the noise, like you said, right, but not the detail. And so I guess my question then becomes, would the intent be that students that are ordinarily resident in Bermuda will be eligible to vote as opposed to just students?
Yes.
That means that Anthony is here. I've been back and forth for the past 4 years.
You
but
live
in
in Bermuda,
right?
but you're temporarily off the island in school. Not someone who doesn't live in Bermuda but just happens to be in school. So those are the nuances that need to be worked out. And one of the things when we go back to the OBA bill was we don't want to pass this until we actually know what those nuances are.
Okay.
Because what I don't want is you come up with the nuances like, but the legislation already says.
Right.
Sort of thing.
So what comes to mind now as an example would be, I'm a student. I'm going to be my undergraduate for 4 years, and I go away each semester, and I come back each summer break to work or whatever the case may be. The other person is they go away for 4 years for its entirety, but still getting the education. So will you try to differentiate between those two? Because we are still,
that's going to be led by the discussions of who does qualify for that. Interestingly, when we looked at like the Cayman model. Students who go off to the university are eligible for 2 years after they graduate, but if they do not return home, they are dropped from the register. So like there are also different sorts of nuances that I'm sure that we can have confidence of talking about and get to the point where everyone is kind of happy of here we are. Again, Anthony, it goes back to what I said about I know some of these things are baby steps.
Yes.
And we've heard people ask, like, well, what about if I'm in the hospital? I had to be rushed off to go in the hospital and stuff. And I said, and I'm, as I said, I'm not naive enough to think that we'll come up with the perfect package. But I do find it necessary to temper expectations to say that may be where we eventually end up, but it's going to take us baby steps because the suspicion around the use of the electoral process to unduly influence elections will always be something that we have to take into account. We just can't simply ignore the fact that there have been parties in the past that have utilized that for unfair advantages. And we have to take that into account as we move forward. We'll eventually convince people, surely, to move forward. I mean, when we was in one of the town halls, it was like absolutely no absentee balloting. That's for fraud comes in, So what got people that's in that space?
Yes. Okay.
But we'll have the conversations. We'll prove to them when we have things like, and we often talk about a mock mini election, showing how absentee balloting could work, so people can actually see it firsthand.
It's interesting. Good evening, caller. Thank you for your patience. What's your question or comment?
Well, I hope you got patience with me, but the minister mentioned something that sparked me to call back. I don't really want to keep calling, but my mind is ticking. And
Don't worry.
listen
Just ask all your questions one time.
Okay, here's the question. What he mentioned earlier that the ministers was not involved in this electoral reform.
No.
I'm just wondering in the sense of, I don't know why is that, but just looking at the way that it goes for us as the electorates. Okay, once the government is won by whatever party, the premier is selected by the party, and then of course we as the voters who may not be agreeable to some of the things that the cabinet people who are selected for cabinet are doing, such as ministers like Harvey had with this airport deal. 80% of Bermudians were against this type of leadership coming from that particular party at the time, and the member who was promoting that, of course, we have the airport trying to scrape and scratch, trying to find out how we can put it back the way it should have went, or put it back right in the sense. And we as the people, what I'm just saying is this: we as the people don't have no way of a recall or a way of
I got you.
telling that minister or that particular party that we disagree with what that minister is doing. We should have some rights in that particular area to be able to say, if we see a minister going in a direction in which 85% of the general public is not agreeing with, we should be able to do something about that as the voters. We are the voters. Another thing that needs to be taken a very serious
Yes. Yeah.
take very seriously is that if you are not a genuine born Bermudian, you should not have the right to be able to become premier in this country. We have a very small population of Bermuda. When it comes to being premier in Bermuda, it should be reserved for Bermudian people only.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, caller. He finished off with a rather hearty note, but I'll go back this way in terms of.
And I have a response to the hearty note.
Yeah, and also you can answer this question if you choose, but also the idea of a recall is not part of this process, though, right?
Right. It's not
Because
part
it's a candidate
it's
issue.
not part of this process. It's something I've heard bantered around. I want to say not the 2020 election, probably the 2017 election. I think.
You mean the right to recall?
Yeah, that's not something that person has talked about. Again, it's what I believe in is the power of the people, and that the people are able to force what needs to be done.
Yes, for sure. Yeah.
Right? And what I do find, and that's why I said a hearty response to this gentleman is, one thing is, and you heard me say it earlier, elections have consequences.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Elections have consequences. And the way our system works as first past the post Westminster system, the government that has been duly voted in has the responsibility of running the affairs of the country the way that they see fit. Now, yes, you will listen to you should be listening to your constituents.
Correct.
And the things and the issues that they have, and try and do everything that you can in your power to ensure that you are making sure that they are taken care of with those sorts of things. But you're never going to do everything that pleases everybody 100%. But you want to aim for 100%. But no, you're never going to reach there. But you do want to do things that you can feel relatively secure that you've done the right thing. I'm not going to second guess what happened at the airport.
Yes.
I see some flaws in the way it was done, but I do believe in my heart that at the time, these guys were doing what they thought was best for Bermuda. I don't believe that it was best. There's a difference between believing that you believe that you're doing the best thing and me thinking that that's not the best thing.
Understood.
Right? I've been in this game, frontline politics, since 2011 when I was appointed a senator.
Yes.
I've ran in elections in 2012, 2017, 2016, 2017, 2020, and 2025. I've run in 5 elections. I know what it takes. And I also know that it takes a special person to want to do this over and over and over and over again. And so it is easy to have comments without actually being in the game and understanding some of the things that you must go through. Now, in terms of only born Bermudians, we have a process of becoming a Bermudian.
Yes.
And that process is not an easy one. Right? If you're doing it through marriage,
Actually,
if you're doing it through marriage, well, you got to be married 12 years, and then it's a big, a big application fee you pay that takes like 2 years or whatever. It's not an easy thing to go from non-Bermudian to Bermudian, and the reason it's done that way is to show that you are dedicated to this country,
right?
And you're not a fly-by-night.
Well,
same guy?
I'm not sure.
Not a fly-by-night process, right? And so, while I understand the romanticism around the term born Bermudian, I understand it completely. And this goes back to what we touched on earlier about the use of the immigration policy to purposely dilute the voting population. I get that. I absolutely get it and understand that we'll never go back to those days. But I do have to correct that young gentleman who called and say that if you've actually gone through that process that's in place now and become a Bermudian, you have every right as a Bermudian.
And actually, if my memory serves right, one of our very popular leaders was actually not a born Bermudian, believe it or not. And I'll leave the listening audience to think about that or to try to find out who that person was. But I'm almost 99% sure that one of our very popular leaders was actually not a born Bermudian. And again, I don't think that's a relevant point because it's going to be a person who is qualified under Bermuda law to be a Bermudian and can run and has the best interest. Because remember, they don't just do it; they have to convince everyone else to allow them to do it. First of all, get voted as an MP, and then convince their party to support them and get everybody to support them as a leader. So it's not an easy road. Good evening, caller. Welcome to Insight. What's your question or comment?
Yeah, good evening, gentlemen, and
yes, sir.
Minister, and Ms. Richardson.
My last caller. Go ahead.
As of this moment here, on what little feelings and little info I have, I want us to be a part of CARICOM. But I know that I probably don't have all the information to make a well-rounded decision on it there. So I'm hoping that government and others, maybe I got to dig deeper myself for information, but others who are in the know and government get information out there for people to help us to make a decision.
Yes.
To help us to support the decision government wants, or go against the decision which government wants.
Yes.
So I'm hoping the information comes out there more. That's one thing I'm hoping for.
Got you. Thank you.
And number two, as far as voting, I think I'm in favor of one date every time there's a general election. One date for that there.
You mean
I think in America they have around one
fixed date elections.
Pardon me?
Fixed date elections.
Oh, okay, fine. I'll go along that there. Yeah.
No, I'm saying that's the term that is used for.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, caller.
And income tax.
That's
Okay, I remember one time. I'm talking about. This is just me thinking to myself.
But those questions, right, are not to do with tonight's topic.
I probably ain't been listening enough
No problem.
to hear on tonight's topic there. Sorry.
That's okay. No worries at all. So, Minister, one question which you have answered already, I think, but I want you to amplify this is, what is the target date to implement these changes?
September 2026.
So this year?
This year. As I said, the dates for the sitting of the House have already been decided all the way up until September.
Okay.
That'll be the last September. That'll be the last. I think it's the last Friday in September. Will be the last date we sit before we go into our recess or well, I can't remember the term of what we do and we stop Parliament, and then the next time we come will be prorogue. We will prorogue Parliament and then come back with a throne speech, and obviously at that time we'll come back with a new leader.
Oh right, yes. Ties in. Okay.
We'll come back with a new leader of the Progressive Labour Party as well. Once that process takes place in October. And so I'm trying to remember what the gentleman said that actually did relate to what we were talking about. because he talked about CARICOM.
Yes. CARICOM paper text, not directly related.
Right. Well, it's not directly related, but that's something you would have to refer to Minister Lightbourne. But
Yes.
I do know that there is plans to ensure they have, open conversation around that, so people will know what
Clearly.
exactly the
Yes.
deal is,
Yeah.
and what they are waiting for is the response from CARICOM to say, Bermuda, if you do want to join, here is the
Yes.
here
The rules and stuff, yeah.
the things that you'll have to abide by.
Yes.
So it doesn't make sense having conversation before we know what the rate, what they're going to come back and say, here's your
Yes.
guardrails,
Okay.
right? And here's the things that you need to do. Here's the things that we need to do, and all that
Nice.
stuff.
Okay.
So, it's like saying, let's talk about what the picnic's going to be like.
Right.
And you didn't even decided the day it's going to be on. You decided what food's going to
Fair
be
enough.
there. You decided who's being invited.
Yes,
But
yes,
you
yes.
want to talk about how the event's going to look,
Uh-huh.
sort of thing. And so I ask people to just exercise patience.
Sure, okay.
With that, it will come. As soon as I'm sure, as soon as Minister Lightbourne knows
Yes.
what that is, and they get the response from CARICOM on what that looks like, the public will then look like it.
Gotcha.
Don't be fooled by actors
Noise, okay.
that are out there just making noise
Sure.
and saying, you should be telling us, you should be telling us, you should be telling us. You can't tell what you don't know.
Trevor.
And what you don't want to do is talk about, imagine starting to have a conversation that goes down one road, and then you get back and find out that road is not an option
Sure.
for Bermuda's membership.
Okay. That's interesting. So we are actually past the hour, believe it or not. But in your role as the minister for the cabinet and for the cabinet office and digital innovation, what final comments do you want to give in terms of tonight's topic or any other for that matter, since you are here?
Right. Well, I just want to let the public know that we'll be moving forward with this. We have the 2 town halls, one tomorrow at Workman's. The town halls start at 6:30, and we
Okay.
generally end around 8 o'clock.
Gotcha.
We go to 8. Some of them have finished, around 7:45, sort of thing. Some have gone a little longer because people actually
Yes.
talk. On Tuesday, we will be at the Bermuda College, and on Thursday, we will be at Summers Isles Lodge up by
This-
White Hill Field.
Okay, gotcha.
Up at White Hill Field. So please, also, I will say that we'll be launching on forums.gov.bm as well. So you'll be able to voice your opinion digitally,
Yes, okay.
if you wish as well. Every one of the questions you ask is written down and is put into our
Nice.
catalog of questions that we do have. We have a mailing list that you can join if you wish to continue to receive updates. And that information will be on the flyers as well. It's a QR code. You scan it. It takes you to a page where you put your information in, and you'll get on the mailing list to receive information about this.
Okay.
In addition to this, there's some more exciting things coming out of our ministry. Of course, we're still working on the signs, the signage thing. You'll see that there's not been as much proliferation of signs. We've had
These are
conversations.
the big banners that advertise the events, okay?
We've had conversations with promoters, et cetera, and we've got a gentleman's agreement about where not to do this stuff.
Okay.
And of course, that junction in Devonshire between T Street.
T Street?
You see there's been very few
Okay.
banners there for promotion. There have been people who haven't been engaged in the conversations we've had that have put stuff
Sure.
up there. But when we've reached out, they've removed them. So there are some areas where we've said, guys, let's avoid those. And you will have noticed the kind of rancor around it has kind of tampered down.
Okay, good.
We've still seen posters,
Yes, yes,
but
yes.
we just haven't seen them in some of these particular areas. I'm not going to say all of them, but I know T Street was always of concern of people, and so they've agreed that we won't post there. We'll do other places, but we're still working on what that regime
Yes.
is going to look like. Another exciting one that we're looking to launch in this year's scholarship season is a new government scholarship scheme that provides funding up to $30,000 a year in exchange for 5 years of government service. So it's like it's a revised bursary program that we're looking to implement in this year's scholarship program as well. So I'm looking forward to doing that, and amongst some of the other things that we'll be talking about in the coming months.
Okay. Well, Minister, thank you very much for coming on by.
No, thank you.
You've shared lots of information that I was not aware of, and I trust that the listening audience was also informed about electoral reform, the importance of it. And if I may say, I guess looking as if we will have the absentee voting in this year on whatever basis you do it, but at least for the students that can be demonstrated to be ordinarily resident, but just away in school, that they'll be able to vote in the next election. And to the listening audience, I trust that those young people that are affected will in fact vote, because voting is very, very important to all of us. And people may say, well, you're not going to have an impact, but yes, you will, and you'll be very surprised again in terms of sometimes a decision is made by one vote. Other times it may be one person that has enough volume to get something done. And so I want to encourage everybody to listen. And as I always close out, to listening audience, please, please, please make sure if you're out early or out late, wear a high visibility vest or a light or something, because we need to be able to see you. Those that are driving sometimes are tired, under the influence, whatever they're doing, you want to give them as much notice as possible to avoid a collision. Otherwise, Net Bermuda, we trust that we will see you next week, Lord willing, with another edition of Insight. Please, please, please enjoy your week, and make up in your mind to do something for somebody else, because that's truly how we make Bermuda a better place. On that note, I'll say good night, Bermuda.